Our guest today is a renowned specialist in neuroscience and business, a master of hacking into human brain, lowering your defenses and gaining access to information you might prefer to keep a secret. Banks paid Professor Cerf to hack into their systems. He consulted with some of the world's best companies, such as Ferrari and US government. Moran is a regular consultant to Hollywood films and TV shows. He is also the author of 5 fascinating books and a 4-time US National Storytelling Champion. Professor Cerf is with us today to tell you a story that might hack your brain while you're listening. So stay vigilant. So happy to have you here, Moran.
Thank you.
First question, from hacking and robbing banks to neuroscience and recording dreams. How did this change could happen? What triggered your change?
Like most changes, I think there's a combination of many things, and like most stories in our life, you can tell it only backwards. Like once it happened, you start to say, oh, it probably was this and that made me do that. But if I were to come up with a story to why I did what I did, I would say that always I was interested in the brain, kind of big questions about life. Do we have free wills? What do dreams mean? How did life begin? Are there aliens? Like all the cool questions that everyone is interested in. And at some point, I thought that those are questions that no one can answer. And as I started to work as a hacker and kind of figure out that you can actually dive into black boxes and uncover the inside, I realized that maybe there is a way to apply the same tools to the biggest black box in our life, which is our brain, and start answering those questions. And I kind of said, let's try one. And as soon as I realized that it works, I said, let's try all. And this is what I'm doing right now.
So many of the listeners, they don't know the story, how you started robbing banks. And I know you did it 4 times actually live, going in the bank. By the way, did you succeed taking money out of bank those 4 times?
I have a record of still more successes than failures. But I think the failures are pretty big when I did, so I remember them more. But yeah, we had, I think, out of 4 or 5 times, I think that we tried to do that. At least twice it worked perfectly, once somewhat, and 2 total failure.
How did you come up with this idea, or how did it happen that you actually did your first robbery?
So my job at the time was a computer hacker. So my job was to try to break into banks virtually, as in online, and try to see if someone can steal money or steal information from the banks by hacking using computers. This was my main job, and I was hired by the banks to try to show that it is possible and then teach them how to stop it. This was my job. What I later learned is that involved in this job was also the idea that you can try to actually rob the bank itself. They wanted to see if someone can come and turn off the cameras that are supposed to monitor things, or maybe someone left the password next to the computer, and if you just look at it, you can actually get inside. So they paid us to do more than just hack remotely, but actually try to get into the bank physically. And this was in the contract all the time, but we never really thought we should do that, because what do we know about actually robbing banks? At some point, a combination of many events in the team led to someone saying, hey, let's just try to do that. And we tried to do that, failed miserably, but realized how kind of in a way possible it is to actually rob a bank. Like the difference between thinking about it and actually doing it was so virtual, like flippant. Like we immediately know it and said, okay, let's do it again, this time with a little more preparation.
I love that story where you told about a lady working in a telecommunication company, and she refused actually to give the password when you faked it. Do you mind telling the story? Sure. It's an amazing story.
So in one of the things that we teach about hacking is that people tend to have 2 or 3 layers of defense, and if you break one of them, the others kind of fall like dominoes. So practically what we did back then was try to hack into a big telephone company. So imagine one of those kind of, T-Mobile or Vodafone or one of those big companies, and we were trying to actually get in. The way we did it is we called the person in charge of all the security at 5 p.m. on a Friday, kind of just when she's about to go home, ending the week.
She's very keen to
wants to leave. Then we call and we start to be slow and annoying in asking her for the password. What we did is we pretended that we were technicians out in the field who had a problem and tried to get into one of the systems, and the password doesn't work, so we asked her for the password. Now, she knew right away that you're not supposed to give the password to anyone who calls you on the phone, so she said no. And we tried our best to actually convince her that we know something. We said, look, I remember the first 3 characters, just not the last 5. Can you give me just the last 5? And actually, we had the first 3. She said no. We tried to intimidate her by telling her, look, if you don't give it to us, then there's going to be no reception for the next 3 days. It's the weekend. We're going to lose money. We tried all the techniques we had. And she said no. And that's it. We couldn't get, so we hang up the phone and move on. And on Monday morning, she got a call from the chief security officer, the head of security in the company, who congratulates her because he tells her, hackers try to get in and they ask you for the password and you didn't give it, even though they tried to push you. And it's such a great example of how you should do it that I'm going to actually send an email to the entire company telling them about the story and about your kind of courageous behavior. I want to ask you a few questions about your life before I do that. How long have you been with the company? What is your role? What did you go to school for? How old are you? Many, many questions to kind of understand who she was so we can write it in the article. And as she explained to the person about her decisions, the company was hacked. And it turned out that I was the one who called her the morning after, pretending to be the chief security officer, asking her a lot of questions. And in her answers, she gave me all the information I needed to actually hack into her account. She gave me her first name and last name, her security number, her mother's maiden name, the puppy name, the car name, everything we need to know in order to get her password, get in and hack from there. And that's actually something that is true for a lot of people, that the lesson here, because people are very good in stopping attack when it comes the first time, but then usually after they win one attack, they lower their guard and they say, okay, I stopped the attack, so now I'm good. And then the second one is the one that actually will come to get you. And that's kind of a lesson about life, if you want.
That's amazing. But do you think she has been actually hacked by you because she had this feeling of pride? Do you think it was also a big component of why she opened up immediately?
Yeah, I think so. So I think that hacking in that sense is any way to get people to give you information. And we think about hacking as like, someone sitting in a little cave, typing numbers and crunching kind of codes. But it could also be asking the right question. Or it could be asking the question in the right time when a person is very vulnerable and ready to give it to you, or pretending that you're someone senior and getting the information from them, or making them actually open the door for you. It doesn't require just coming in through the door if someone left the window open. And that is kind of what humans are usually bad at. They're bad at thinking out all the cases. And so if they're really, really good in stopping one attack, they fail at stopping the other.
Using your terms, if you could hack into anything, whatever it is, what would you hack? It can be anything in the universe, but you probably think it's impossible or close to impossible.
I would love to have access to diaries of people in my family 150 years ago.
You think they had diaries?
I think that to me, what's interesting is to know history of people that you somehow are connected to that's very personal. So, I know the history of the family. I know where they were. I know that they were in this war or living in this village. But this doesn't really tell me anything about, how my great-great-grandfather actually fell in love with my great-great-grandmother. Or, how were they in school? Like the things that actually make life are the small things. And I would love to have access to those. I would love to be having front row seat to things in the past that somehow connect to me, but are not directly in my life.
To be honest, it's not the answer I expected.
Tell me.
Like completely not. It's actually a very interesting answer. That's why are you so interested in the feelings and the little stories of your ancestors?
So I feel generally that the key to understanding people is small stories. So if you ask a person kind of questions like, why did you choose to become a doctor? They would give you an answer, but they don't know the answer really. And it's usually a lot more complex than the one they give you. They say, I always like to help people. That's about it. They say, it's really paying. Or I wanted to do like my dad did. Like that's kind of the simple one-line answer. But the real answers are a lot more complex. And the way to know them is not by asking questions, but by observing behavior. So if you have access to a person's week, you can follow them for a week and see what they do, you will know more about how they choose things and why they choose them than anything they will tell you. And in that sense, I think that the ability to do that with people that in a way are in your life, like you are the product of those people, is fascinating. Like to meet my great-great-grandfather and decide what's similar about us. There's some DNA, there's some connection between us, but in practice, it's not really in my life. Like I have no relation. I don't think I know his name, even if it's like 3 or 4 generations back. But somehow it's connected. To me, that's interesting to understand really how you are by looking at others that affect you, but not directly.
Amazing. Do you think our ancestors are really the roots that hold us strong?
So I think that's a neuroscience answer I'm going to give you right now. I think that a lot of the things we call intuitions, creativity, emotions are actually not really that. They're just our ancestors coded in our brain. So here's what I mean by that. Imagine a monkey 500 years ago, not thousands, just 500 years ago, sitting in the savannah and seeing a banana 50 meters away. And he's about to go to the banana and catch it, but he sees the lion 200 meters away. And he starts to think, oh, if I go to the banana, the lion might run to me and catch me. Should I do it or not? And he starts calculating consciously and cognitively what to do. And in the end, he decides that it's not a good idea to go to the banana because he might be eaten. And he goes away. Another monkey does a different calculation and actually goes to the banana and gets eaten by the lion. So one monkey gets to have kids, the other one does not. And many, many generations after, we're the descendants of the monkeys that made the right calculation.
Cautious ones.
The cautious one, for instance, in this example, which means that in our brain already, this fear of animals is innate. We're just born with this fear. We don't really need to calculate it anymore. We just feel afraid when something bad happens and we just don't do it. So we're born afraid of loud sounds or the darkness or storms or unexpected movement. All of those things are... Exactly. They happen to us. We don't know why. We don't know why. We didn't see anyone falling from the building, but somehow we get scared when we are high above. And it's because in our brain, through years of evolution, history has coded the right answers in our mind, and we just feel it. And we call it emotions, or we call it intuition. I just had a thought that kind of came to me that told me I should do this, but I don't know why. And I think in a way, those are our ancestors coded in our brain telling us how to do. So I would love to meet them when they actually made the decisions and see how they came up with them, because I'm the output of those decisions.
In what you just said, isn't there the root of our fear to make a wrong decision?
Absolutely.
And that's actually to become, for example, entrepreneur or somebody who goes against the logic, not the logic, against the instinct. It's super fearful, but actually weirdly, it can bring us to better life or better chances to survive.
So it's a balance, right, between risks and successes. Some people who have taken a risk and have had a successful outcome actually code this as new information, and they might take more risks. We know that entrepreneurs that had a good success are more likely to make another one, and some that had one failure are actually likely to stop there. And it's because we think like that. Our brain codes rewards and pain as pros and cons of behavior, and then amplifies or stops them. And in many ways, you can think about it not just in one lifetime, but also across lifetime. If your parents are ones that took risks, it's coded in your brain, and you will be a little bit more risk taker. If their parents were more like that, you might be even more. And in a way, that's what I meant by going into the history. We're already born with some kind of propensities for some behaviors and not another. We don't know that. We think that this is who we are. But the reality is that somewhere there lie the questions that drive your decisions down the line.
Talking about the past, can we really change it? You have a very interesting approach to it. So do you mind?
So there's kind of physical answer and practical answer. The physical answer is that we don't know if we can actually go back in time and change. That's the physicist. But we definitely can change the past in our mind. And most of the past exists in the form of memories in our head. So if someone asks you what you did yesterday, all you know is that there's some kind of memory residue of that event in your mind, and that's what you load. There's no more evidence for the past. It's just what exists in your brain. If you can change it as in tell a different story, if you can convince everyone who was there with you to tell a different story, it changed. That's it. There's no more past besides what stays in our memories. So if you and your husband together went to have dinner, and somehow I managed to change your mind and change his mind, make the two of you think that you, instead of having dinner, were playing golf last night. That's it. That's reality right now. There's no more evidence to the past. And that's in many ways how people can totally rewrite their experiences. It's a feature of the brain. The brain has made it such so that we wouldn't be caught in a spiral loop of thinking bad thoughts if they happen, but learn how to cope with them and move on. So when something traumatic happened to you, instead of just reliving the trauma again and again and again every day, we know that our brain has a capacity to load the memory, modify it, and resave it differently. Load the modified version, change it again, and resave it differently, such that after a few times, you have a different memory, which means that you can take out the bad stuff and just remember the experience as a good thing. And that's a beautiful kind of property of the brain.
Is it something a person can actually use and apply by themselves?
Yes. So,
like, for example, in a couple of simple steps, how is it done?
I think that it sounds trivial, but it actually works beautifully by telling the story again and again. So if you're having a, say, bad breakup, let's say something terrible happened and your boyfriend broke up with you and you're feeling miserable. What you would do typically is you go to a friend or a therapist, let's say, and tell them the story. As you tell them the story, what your brain does is it loads the details and it opens them up for new interpretation. And whatever happens during the time you tell the story will actually resave over writing the original description.
But what's the promise that the person will not make the memory even worse?
There's no promise, just the intention. So if you are going to bad therapists or to a hostile friend, then they will help you actually get a worse experience.
We don't need help. We do it ourselves. We bring it up. Mm-hmm. We make it worse and store it back, and it gets worse and worse with it.
I mean, typically, it's very hard for the brain to actually tell a story without an audience. Mm-hmm. If someone tells you just tell a story to yourself, you kind of unable to load the entire this. By having a social experience, we typically see the story from the perspective of the other person, and this makes us immediately tell it with more details and more nuances and kind of share it with rich detail. But in that sense, you could, in theory, just sit and write a diary, and in that you will do the same thing. You will actually make yourself kind of go into the details and change them. And it's true, if you're in bad mood when you do that, or if you focus on the bad things, you're going to actually amplify the bad experiences. Most people's brains tries to heal. So the brain kind of goes in the right direction by doing the healthy aspect of it, which is finding good and positive ways and getting out of it. But if you're suffering from depression, or if you're suffering from PTSD, which means that your brain is unable to rewrite it, you will actually amplify and refuel and go again and again and again. This is where we actually need help. So this is outside of the normal state where you actually are able to help yourself. But with the aid of a friend or a therapist or some mechanism to tell a story, relive it, but change it, art, meditation, we actually are healing our brain, and that's what the brain is for. So the simplest answer is just to tell the story again and again and again, multiple times, and try to think of positive angles. And after a few times, you will help your brain get better. That's a guarantee. That's kind of unbelievable in how simple it is, but it actually works.
So any person who has, I call it unnurturing memories, something that actually brings us down, like being fired from the job, or trying to conceive for a few years and it didn't work, or a relationship which didn't work. Mm-hmm. Even without having a therapist, what they can do, they bring it as a memory and try to find a positive aspect of why it happened, where it led to them. It's like, isn't it the other side of the gratitude, no?
Yeah, so I think that it's not surprising that a lot of kind of ways to self-help have basically coded this in different ways in the same idea. That if you focus on the positives, if you stop to reflect on your life, this is meditation or gratitude, they're all angles of this idea. Now neuroscience kind of gives it a very mechanical understanding, which is what's going on in the brain. But it's not surprising. People knew it in years of kind of practice. And what neuroscience added was more a codified and quantified version. Now we can actually monitor that it works. We can actually tell you if it doesn't work, what to do chemically to actually enhance or reduce it. We can try on animals to see what processes are driving it and stopping it so we can give you the right drug. So things like that. But it's not surprising. People have known that something works when you talk about stories, and specifically if you do it with someone from the outside who is able to reflect to you for generations.
How important it is to filter the information? I mean, how is our brain vulnerable, to which extent, to what we consume as information and how it changes us?
So this is a really important point that I think is going to change our entire experience of the world in the coming decade, which is that we're used to information being filtered by our senses and then getting into our brain in a safe way. Meaning what your eyes saw was then put in your brain, and you could not get stuff into your brain without passing through your eyes when it comes to vision. Same with audition, with sound. The only way for sounds to get into your brain was through your ears. Your ears sample the world, filter the information and put it in, and that's what's in your brain. You never could get into the brain without going through one of those 5 senses. And for the first time now, we can actually bypass them. We can put stuff in your brain without going through your filters. Now, we spoke about sight and sound, but it's still for any piece of information. We can now get into your brain, load an idea into your brain, and it will stick there as if it came from the outside and as if it's yours. And the interesting thing is that once an idea is in your mind, because you don't have any system to vet information in your brain, you believe it entirely as if you put it there. And therefore, you will base your future on this idea. So it doesn't just end with what you see and what you hear, but it could be memories. You suddenly will have memories that aren't yours, that someone else put in your brain, and you think that they're yours. So you will live life as if you have gone through the experience that this memory talks about and just build a story that relies on that. This is no longer science fiction. This is something that we can do now with animals, just in a lab to show that it's possible. And with some basic experiments, we do it with my participants, where we change their memories and show that they will come up with a different story for memories that I put inside their head. We do it a little bit with people that are sleeping by changing the memories that we put in their head when they're not there to protect their brain from letting stuff in. And we could, in theory, do it with other people that have a device inside their head that listens to the outside world and is ready to talk to their brain. And those are no longer a minority. There are more and more people who have this device in their brain for clinical purposes. And now they basically listen to the outside world, and we can put new information in their head. So this is a real risk that will be with us in the near future.
But also with those techniques, can we teach people empathy, or people like autistic people to learn things they would never otherwise?
Yes. So you can look at it as good and bad. So we could enhance your brain by giving you new skills and new tools that speak to your gray matter directly in a much faster and scalable way. That's the good stuff. That's why people would love that, and they would want more of it, and they would open the door for a lot of those enhancements. With it comes the bad side, which is once you let people access the vault of your identity, you don't control what people put inside. It could be good things and bad things. So you would, like most of us, open the door because you say, oh, I love to see more videos from the entire world. And you wouldn't know that in doing that, you actually open the door for hackers to start manipulate what you see and give you misinformation. Or you would say, I want to have...
That's spooky.
Yeah. So I mean, it's always this balance. Like we love to see things, and what we get with them are bad things. So Facebook is great. It allows you to connect with your friends and see your family from far away and get kind of rich access to a lot of things. And with it comes also the ability to give you things that you didn't want to see and change your mind and stop you from seeing things that you need to see and kind of manipulating your behavior. That's the good and the bad that come together. With enhancement, we could make people smarter, be able to solve problems in a much more efficient way, much more accurate, have more IQ and so on. But then we also put a device that listens to the outside world, and some hacker can take over our brain and start changing our behavior so we can vote differently, not knowing why we did that. Or break up with someone that we love because someone else told us to, and really kind of change the core of who we are.
Are you more worried about these discoveries and changes and the scientific new approaches, or are you more curious about them?
Tough. It's a good question again, because I'm on 2 hats here. As a scientist, I'm more curious. I want to know as much as I can about the world. That's my job. And also, this is why I chose this profession, because I want answers. As a citizen, the opposite. I feel that should there be a world where these are the possibilities, we're going to be in bad shape. And I think that I would stop it. If I were kind of leaving the lab and going outside, I would stop it. At the very least, I would regulate it heavily. So if I am asked like a civilian, I would say that I'm extremely surprised that in all the countries that I am connected to, in all the elections that I get to see, no one asks their politicians what are their views on things that are actually risky, like AI, like brain implants. Those things are really scary in what they can do. And at the very least, I would wish that people, when they're about to go vote, would ask politicians about their views and would know what's their stance on that. So they can say, I don't like this idea, or I would go the other way. And then people and politicians would actually have to think about it. Right now, people just ignore it. And this means that it's totally left for scientists to move forward. And some of them are good, some are not good. And there's no control for that. That, I think, is the risk.
But you being there, right, in the epicenter of all this development actually gives you also tools to stop it, in a way, how to protect. If it's going to happen anyhow, if it's almost inevitable that we will go this direction because too many people are curious, and some want to monetize this idea, some want to use in different ways. But this is also a way to actually stick around and make sure it doesn't go the very wrong way.
So I do it in a few ways. One way is I actually self-monitor. So sometimes I tell my students, we're not going to do that. Even though it's interesting, we shouldn't do that, at least not without asking other people for their view, because it might be a bad idea and we can't think of anything. So let's just pause on that. That's one way. I don't do it often, unfortunately, because the temptation to understand things is bigger than the ability to stop ourselves, but sometimes we do that. Another thing we do is we actually use other people's money and resources, and in that we kind of open ourselves to them being our checks and balances. So when we do something really, really big, we usually go to companies and we say, we want your data or your funding or your help. And then we rely in a way on those companies and those people to also ask questions and kind of think what they care about and know that they have different scrutiny that they have to stand by. So in a way, we kind of open it a little bit for a bigger audience to vote on, kind of that's in our world. And the thing I do the most, which I think in my mind is the best way to handle that, is I go and give talks. So I just go every week I can to the world, not to other scientists, but to the public, and say, let me tell you what we're doing right now in my lab, and what do you think? And I think that in all of my talks, there's always the same 5 questions that come in the end. And one of them is, do you think it's good or bad? And my answer is always, I don't know. It's up to you. This is why I'm here. I'm here to tell you the details of what we're doing. You can go home and talk to your husband or wife or kids or parents and say, I learned that scientists are working on ways to manipulate dreams, to change behavior, to understand our thoughts and write them and read into them and things like that. What do you guys think? And people start debating that and coming back to me and emailing me and saying, I don't like it, or I think it's a great idea, or here's how I will do it, and so on. And by sparking the conversation, I think we're doing the best job, which is putting it in the sunlight. And then everyone can have a view on that.
And develop own tools too.
Develop their own tools. Some of them are, my students many times are senior people in companies. So they actually decide on companies' policies. And that's a good idea. Some of them decide on funding. They go to the government and they say, we want to fund this, and not that they pay taxes. They say, I want my taxes to go to this and not to that. After they hear me say, ask your congressman or congresswoman about their views, they actually ask. And suddenly I hear more and more about people in US politics. They actually start to say, this is how I think about this idea. And they call me and they say, Moran, we heard about you speaking about this idea. Our constituents ask us for our view. We have no view. What do you think we should do? So I think it creates kind of a spiral that I like, which is everyone asked about it. And that is, I think, the first step, and something that scientists ought to do in order to help kind of everyone know more about what's happening.
You were about to give a big speech at the conference here in Italy, in Venice. And you will be talking about the future of the brain and neuroscience.
Yeah.
Could you shed some light on this, if you don't mind?
Sure. So I think that neuroscience is exploding in novelty in the last decade and in the coming years. I would gamble all of my resources on neuroscience being the future of many, many things. And I'm going to choose just a few of them to tell you about them. But I think the reality is that we might be the last species of humans the way we always knew them, because we are starting to engineer thinking. And in that sense, we're able to manipulate what was the core of humans for a while, which is our brain and our body. And Bodies is something that we already know how to do using DNA and manipulation of organs. And brain is something that we're learning how to do. And what we are getting at is that now we can change your thoughts. So we can actually change your memories. And in changing your memories, we're not just changing a memory, which is like a small entity. We actually change your entire conscious experience, because people tend to use the memories to tell a story. When you asked me in the beginning, how did I become a neuroscientist after being a hacker for a while? All I had was our memory of those experiences that I kind of try to weave into a story and tell you a narrative about why this led to that. But the memories are all I have. So if I change my memories, that's it. I will tell you a different story. So I can actually change your entire experience of life. And that's something that neuroscientists are doing right now. They're rewriting memories, downloading them, writing over them. That's a big manipulation that will change everything. Another one is that we're starting to understand how senses work in a very profound way, such that we can actually override your senses or add new ones. Up to now, most humans had only eyes, ears, nose, skin, tongue. Those are the ways we kind of sample the world outside. So our entire experience of the world was what those senses could capture. But those senses are limited. Our eyes can only see a thin layer of reality, something between the infrared and the ultraviolet. We don't see everything that's in the world right now. There's X-rays and gamma rays and microwaves and radio waves. All of those exist, but we don't really see them. They're not part of our reality. But we can build sensors.
But do they affect us?
They affect us in that they're part of our experience. Like we can build cell phones that read the signals and respond to them, but we don't really see them. We can pass our hands through those rays without seeing them. But if there was a bat, the bat would actually sense them using its echolocating eyes, and it might fly between them, or it might kind of get scared by a signal reception that comes up and affects its behavior. But we know that the brain of the bat looks exactly like the brain of a human. It's different size and different folding, but the building blocks are the same. It's just that the eyes of the bat are different than the eyes of a human. So the bat samples different parts of the world than what we sample, and then turn this into its own brain. But now we can harness the power of nature to actually enhance our senses. We can take the eyes of the bat, plug them to the brain of a human, and teach humans to see rays of light. Or we can take the birds have in their brain a little device that actually aligns with the magnetic field of Earth. They actually feel the north all the time. When they fly, they just know where north is. So they have a different device, and we can plug that into our brain, and suddenly you wouldn't have to navigate with GPS. You will just know exactly where the north is all the time. You will just feel it. And we can add all kinds of sensors and essentially expand the experience of the world. We'll see more of the world outside. And this will actually change our reality. It wouldn't just, make us a little bit better in seeing. We could experience things differently. When you go to airport security right now, you have to go to a device that scans your body from the outside, because the eyes cannot see under your clothes. But if we build this device into our brain, suddenly someone looks at you and just sees if you have a weapon in your holster, because they would just know it, because it's there and we could sense that. And the sky is the limit of what we can do to senses. So this is another cool idea. And a third one that I think is going to change in the next coming years is the ability to actually manipulate dreams. I think dreams are a commodity that we all are fascinated by. They happen to all of us multiple times when we go to sleep. And for the most part, we forget them and we have no access to what's going on there. And now scientists are beginning to be able to actually read the content of the dream and see what goes on in your mind when you're sleeping, and then sometimes even write into the dreams, and sometimes even change them while they happen. And this means that you can actually use this resource that our brain creates every night as a commodity. You can make movies that people see when they go to sleep, or you can go to sleep and say, I want to see a dream by Spielberg, and have access to that. Or if you go on a date, you can say, I want to continue the date by actually having a dream of us two going to another place together and continue.
Get married, have children.
Yeah, everything you want, you can kind of put it in your dream. And this, for the moment the dreams are happening, they feel real. So you get real experiences into your life. And I think this is, again, going to change a lot of our experiences, but also become a new commodity. Like right now, you and I are filming an interview, and people are going to watch it on some mechanisms, but we can get them as intimate as possible, right? We can get them to feel like they've been here with us, and we can watch it in their dream. And essentially, this means that all the media companies are going to be after a new medium, like Netflix and Hulu and YouTube. All those companies, they're only showing you movies when you're awake. What a waste. They can now start showing you movies also in other moments, and you get to experience them in the ultimate virtual reality. like really feeling like it's life.
Okay, subscribe and you might see it in your dreams tonight. Yeah, like put a special sign button next to it. That's amazing.
I think I heard that the CEO of Netflix said once in an interview, this is pretty terrible. He said in his interview that the competitor for Netflix is not YouTube or Hulu or TV, it's sleep. Because people waste hours of not watching their content. What a waste.
But what is sleep then? Why do we sleep?
So sleep is a lot of things. Sleep is something that happens for a third of our life. And it's not just one thing. Sleep is many, many things. When you go to sleep for, say, 7 hours, you have different stages. And in each stage, you do different things. In one of them, you rehearse your memories and you strengthen some and weaken the others. In another stage, you actually build muscles and let your body rest. In a third one, you dream, which is you kind of create new worlds and simulate futures and decide which ones you like and not. So all of those have different mechanisms. You need all of them. You need all of them in the right order, in the right timing. But altogether, it's a window of time that our brain is focused on the inside rather than the outside. Instead of taking new information and processing it, you take the one that you already collected and you focus on that. Which ones you need to store stronger? Which ones you need to store weaker? Which ones you need to get rid of? Which ones you need to actually rehearse tomorrow? The body needs some rest, and that's what sleep is doing for us. There are a lot of interesting things about sleep which we still are puzzled by. For instance, how come humans can delay sleep? Of all the animals in nature, humans are the only animal that can actually be tired and not sleep. All other animals, when they're tired, they go to sleep. So we developed a mechanism that allows us to stop ourselves from something that we want to do naturally in our brain. That's a strange thing. Also, there is unclear answer to why humans sleep such that they are entirely unable to do anything. So there are animals in nature that are not paralyzed, and animals that are not paralyzed, and also that are somewhat awake when they're sleeping. So dolphins, for instance, or birds, they sleep one part of the brain at a time. So they kind of shut down this part and they still keep this one awake, so they're not that vulnerable. When we're sleeping, we're basically very vulnerable. Someone can do bad things to us. Some animals stay awake half brain and let the other half, and then they flip. Why do we do it in a very vulnerable way? It's another question, and there are many others.
Maybe in the past we would sleep the same way as animals did.
Yeah, probably. We definitely used to sleep with different positions that were more kind of ready to action, and we changed that to now we sleep horizontally, and we kind of turn around a little bit, but mostly not much. Those are all, we breathe differently, our body temperature changes. All of those things are new, evolutionary, and they give us a lot of advantages, but also risk us. So it's kind of interesting that this is what evolution came up with.
What fascinates you most? A story of spontaneous healing, or what they call spontaneous remission, where actually something has been performed by the will of a person or mind of a person or body of a person alone, or you're more fascinated by what a science can do to human potential or body?
Science.
Science.
Yes. So I feel, a scientist will say that, so it's a little bit like self-fulfilling. Mm-hmm. But I really think that every time we dig deep enough into behaviors that manifested in nature, we figured out how they work scientifically and we can explain them. So when a person comes and says, I had cancer and somehow it disappeared, diving deep into their history and their background tells us something that will kind of predict that the reason for that was A, B, and C and not magic. I think that I love magic as a person. I spend a lot of time with magicians and I practice magic, and I feel it's a really cool way to challenge thinking. But at the end of the day, what's good about all magic is that we actually have an answer. So when you see a magician putting a show, deep inside you know that there must be some way it works that's within the rules of physics. And this gives us, I think, comfort that there's answer to everything that we can explain.
Are you still on the side of quantum physics?
Definitely.
But what makes the particle become either a wave or a particle?
I think I don't know the answer. It's a profound question of science, and I think that it actually brings us close to neuroscience, because it seems that one of the things that drives physics to behave one way or another, what we call in physics to collapse into one state, is the observer, the person with their mind looking at it. And in that sense, it means that there's something powerful to the mind, to the brain, who looks at an experiment that makes the experiment behave one way or the other, which to me ties neuroscience or a human looking at things with the world. Like the world somehow responds to us looking at it, which I think is for some a mystical idea. And I'm not
a mystical idea.
I'm not against it. I actually love it. This is if you want mystical in the sense that, but it's still predictable.
Is it, like, if you're honest with yourself, is it something you would like to prove right or wrong?
Right. Like I would love for the world to have, I mean, not only would I like it to be right, I think that's what the answer is. I think that we're reaching the limit of the things we can answer with the tools we have right now. And I would love for us to have this new tool that will expand our thinking. And I think that this will be the big leap in research that we're missing right now. We're kind of using the same tools to explain everything and we get stuck. And in a way, if someone figures out a new tool, they would totally open up an entire new world of possibilities, which I long for.
But do you think we can bend reality?
So I think that
was the title of one of the interviews.
So I think that yes, the answer is yes. But I think that the answer itself is we already do that all the time. Like reality is our story of the world. So, here's how I see that. You're right now looking at me, which means that photons bounce out of my body into your retina and create an image of me in your mind. So you see me. You can totally change that. You can make it such that in your mind, you will see your husband right now in front of you, and you will think that he is here. Like totally, not just like imagine him, you will actually see something else. Because reality is in your mind. The world around you gives you a proposal that your senses capture and turn into a sense, and then your brain builds a picture out of it in your head. For the most part, it makes sense for your senses, your brain, and the world to align. So you just take what's in the world and you turn it into the brain. But if it didn't make sense, then your brain will immediately come up with a different answer. And it's not just theoretical, it happens. I'll give you an example. Prisoners in Alcatraz, the famous prison in San Francisco where the worst people on earth used to be captured for many years. At some point, if they behaved badly, were put in solitary confinement. They were put in a room, locked with no other humans, with no sunlight, with no clocks, not a lot of room to move. They were just there with their own mind. And for a while, no input from the outside world penetrated their mind. So they didn't see anything new, they didn't hear anything new, they didn't smell anything new, they just sat there and their mind didn't get anything from the outside world. After a few hours of no outside input, their brain said, I'm not getting anything from the outside world, I guess I need to make my own world. And what they reported in books and in interviews was that at some point, magically, they start hallucinating. But they see themselves free, running in the meadows with friends, butterflies, sunlight. Their brain, as soon as it realized that there's nothing coming out from the outside, had to create something from the inside. And it created an entire world, such that when someone came into the world, they had a hard time calibrating back to reality. They didn't even want to leave because suddenly the world inside this prison cell and the brain cell are richer than the world outside.
And they were not dreaming.
They were not dreaming. Their brain actually created a new world. And we think about that as an hallucination, but actually it's what a brain does all the time. It creates realities inside. It's just that most times, because it's not efficient, not smart to create a different reality than the one that our senses give us, we just listen to the senses and we create realities that align with what's outside. But if at some point it doesn't make sense, then your brain is totally up to and able to create a new reality. And you can bend the entire world into your own grasp. And we tell kids sometimes when he says mean things to you, go somewhere else and create a new reality for yourself. Just go away and don't hear it. Or if he says something that's really, really awful, it's your brain that decides whether to hear it or not. And you can decide whether you respond. There's a lot of self-help books that say people can say bad things to you and they can do bad things to you, but it's up to your brain to decide whether you want to get sad or not. Like all that they did is they said words, so molecular vibrations in the air penetrated your ears. Whether it becomes a bad experience is up to you. This is all kind of a self-help version of what I'm saying, which is you can control what reality you see. In experiments in my lab, we teach people to see different things. We just teach them how to override what the eyes propose and see different things in their mind. That's just a mechanical way to actually see different things. We put a picture of an actor on the screen. We tell them, make it so that instead of this picture, you will see something else. And they just learn how to do that with feedback from the inside of their brain. But everyone can do that. And that's normally not what we want to do, because we do want to see what's out there and function. Like if you start saying to people, hey, I see someone else and no one else sees this person and I can talk to them, we would usually put you in some place because say like it's not like you can't function in reality where everyone sees different realities. So we decided to collectively agree on focusing on the outside world. But if the outside world is hurting you, it makes sense to me that you at some point will choose to retire and change things a little bit. This is how dreams work. Like our dreams basically create different realities for us, so we can kind of reflect on the outside reality and decide which one is better for us. Hallucinations are an extreme version of that. Solitary confinement is a situation that forces your brain to do that. And all the time, our brain kind of compares what it wants to see to what the senses provide and decides how to do that. And that's beautiful.
Some people say that schizophrenia is a way to adapt to reality, actually creating your own.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the same
so schizophrenia, I think the big question is, do you control it? Do you have, if it happens to you?
I think on some level, it's a decision, I think, to actually bend your reality and make it more comfortable to you. I think on some level, but it's probably not a conscious level. It's somewhere much deeper.
So that's the question. Like if you're subject to that rather than the kind of driver of that, then we would say that you have a problem, right? If you say, I want us to stop, and it doesn't stop, then you have a problem. That's when we need to help you. Because you say, okay, now I realize that there's a person here that I can talk to, interact with, get advice from, but no one else sees them. And when I feel that everyone else has different views of me because of this person, and I want them gone, I can't, help me. And that's kind of the extreme version of that. Otherwise, we will have a situation where we can't really tell anymore what's real and what's not, and we will have a hard time aligning reciprocal synchronization in brains. If you see a different world when I talk to you, how can we synchronize our brains? So there's an extreme which is not good for us, but to an extent, this is what the brain does all the time. The brain first creates a proposal, then it gets information from the outside world through the senses, matches the proposal, and changes the proposal a little bit to align with reality rather than just sees the world objectively.
God, sounds complex. Aren't you curious to put yourself in a confinement cell?
Very much so. So I actually tried small scale, and I would love to do it full time. Like I would love to. I have a friend who did it. He told me that it's really difficult in terms of the clocks in the brain. So what happened to him was, he says, if you put yourself in a solitary confinement for say 48 hours, first few hours you just sit there kind of bored. At some point you fall asleep, and when you fall asleep and you wake up, because there are no cues from the outside world, whether it's day or night or so on, you have no idea if you just slept 7 hours or 20 minutes. And you don't know, like your brain feels like it's slept and woke up, and you don't know. And then suddenly, you keep counting time, but you fall asleep again, you wake up again, you totally lose a sense of like how long it's been. And he said that many people would go through that. They know that they're supposed to be there for 48 hours, but it feels to them like days have passed. Like they think that someone forgot them because they slept 5 times, for instance, maybe 20 minutes each, but they don't know if it's been 2 nights or 5 minutes or so on. And you start getting nervous that maybe people forgot you, and how long is it going to be? And you can't really count time anymore to know, okay, it's been six hours already, so only 42 more to get to 48, or it's been 2 nights and it's like almost over. And what gets kind of taking over is just paranoia. You get scared because the inability to have clocks is making everything kind of scary. If you just have a cue that says, okay, here's how much time it's been, or here's the sunlight, everything becomes very easy. Then you have no problem doing it many, many times. But without the clocks, people lose their mind quickly.
It's fascinating. If you ever do a study, I'm in. I'm in. I don't want to end this conversation. It was so interesting. I think I could go on and on. When I saw it first time, I thought, I have to meet this man. I have to interview this man. And I was completely sure it was my decision. Now I start doubting about this. I don't know what you did. It did work, and I'm very happy to meet you.
Thank you so much. It was
lovely.
lovely.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. Please share this story with someone who needs to hear it.